The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
The apostles said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." The Lord replied, "If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you would say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you. Who among you would say to your servant who has just come in from plowing or tending the sheep in the field, 'Come here immediately and take your place at the table'? Would he not rather say to him, 'Prepare something for me to eat. Put on your apron and wait on me while I eat and drink. You may eat and drink when I am finished'? Is he grateful to that servant because he did what he commanded? So should it be with you. When you have done all you have been commanded, say, 'We are unprofitable servants. We have done what we were obliged to do.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord.
I have a friend named Mary. I met Mary several years ago while I was working at my previous ministry. For the last 10 years or so, I have worked on a bread truck that takes food to some of the most violent and chaotic neighborhoods legit in our country right now. If you watch the nightly news, you've probably seen these neighborhoods. They're called Back of the Yards and Inglewood on Chicago's South Side. 6 days a week, we venture out into these streets to deliver bagged lunches to people in need. On one of my very first trips out on this bread truck, we pulled up to a park, we stopped our truck, and the crowds begin to gather. Hundreds of people show up to this bread truck. One by one, the people take their lunch and disappear back to their homes. As I was handing out food, I noticed in the corner of my vision a woman standing there, meek and humble, with her eyes cast towards the ground. She took her bag of food and she too left. About 5 minutes later, the crowd is still building and we're super busy handing out food, and I felt a tug on the sleeve of my habit. The woman had returned, and this time she had eyes full of tears. She pulled me close and whispered into my ear, "Brother, when you have a second, I really need to talk to you in private because I have no one else in this world to talk to." Mary told me that within the last 6 months, both of her sons were shot and killed by rival gangs. The first son, several months prior, was gunned down in a drive-by shooting in an alley just behind their house. But her baby boy, her younger son, was shot just 1 week prior as he was coming home from his first legitimate job. He was finally turning his life around, and his first day of work as a construction worker, his second chance at life, went horribly awry. The rival gangsters saw him getting out of his car, and as he was getting his lunchbox from the back seat, no doubt tired and proud of his first legitimate day of work, they drove up and put 3 bullets in his stomach. Sadly, this was a very normal story for the neighborhood that I lived in Chicago. Mary said, "Brother, as both of my children were dying in the hospital this year, I couldn't even go to see them." And she got more choked up, and then she continued, Because, brother, I have a crippling heroin addiction that I have been battling for years. And then she continued her confession through pain-filled tears of a mother. Brother, I wanted the drugs more than I wanted to say goodbye to my own children. Do you think God can ever forgive me? Do you think that I can ever forgive myself? What was I supposed to say in this situation? This neighborhood is filled with chaos and death and sickness. It's everywhere. We hugged. We cried together. I fumbled for my words, all of which were probably unsatisfying. And in my awkwardness in trying to respond, I remembered that I had a miraculous medal hanging around my neck, the Virgin Mary. And so I took it off and I gave it to her. It's the only thing I had. I introduced Mary to Mary, and I assured her that Mary knows the depths of the pain of losing a child. And I asked her to go home and pray to God and to pray for me. An act of simple faith. Over the last few years, I have checked in on Mary several times. I have been there as she has relapsed on drugs many times. But I've also been there to see her simple faith grow. 1 week before coming to Montana, I was out on the bread truck one last time, and I saw Mary again. She saw the bread truck from a few blocks away, and she came running towards us with that miraculous medal swinging proudly outside of her shirt. No more tears in her eyes, and she even had a full mouth full of brand new dentures. She hugged me and said, "Brother, I have a job, and I haven't used heroin in 2.5 months." Mustard seed faith. The smallest of all seeds. I had mustard seed faith in Mary, and she had simple mustard seed faith in me. Her small faith grew into a new relationship with a God who would indeed forgive her, stand her back up on her feet, and walk with her into a new future. Our God is a God who brings creation out of chaos every time. Do we have the simple faith to see it happening? It's happening. It's easy to look around and see all of the chaos in our world and simply throw our hands up and walk away. It's easy to be like the prophet Habakkuk, crying out to God, begging God to just come down here and do something about all of this. And this is a totally normal and rational response to violence and chaos. But like the prophet, we mustn't complain and then remain stuck in bitterness and doubts. But in the end, we resign ourselves to faith, and we will find life. Doubts? Sure. Frustrations? Absolutely. But hopefully always landing in a place of simple faith and trust that God will ultimately transform chaos into creation, ugliness into beauty, our doubts into moments of profound grace. We cannot let our hearts be hardened by the trials that we undergo. As today's psalm reminds us, Israel forgot his mighty works. They lost faith in the sound words of God's promise. They tested God in the desert. They demanded a sign. Come on, God. Just prove to us that you're going to fix all of this. And by the way, if you could fix it right now, that'd be great, God. Thanks. And if you could do it just the way we think you should do it, that would be super great too, God. Thanks. But God didn't redeem Israel from Egypt only to let them die in the desert. And certainly he doesn't ransom us from our moments of faithlessness only to abandon us in our chaotic experience of life. He is our God, and we are the people he shepherds, always. Though at times his mercy and justice seem long delayed. If we call on the Lord in simplicity, as the apostles do in today's gospel, he will increase our faith. He will stir into flame the Holy Spirit who has dwelt within us since our baptisms. And as St. Paul tells us in the epistle, the Lord will always give us the love and self-control that we need to bear our share of hardship for the gospel with a strength that comes from God alone. Our task is to continue doing what he has commanded us, to love and to build up his kingdom, trusting that his vision still presses on to its fulfillment, because God's vision still has its time. And one day, though we are but unprofitable servants, we will be invited to eat and drink at our Master's table. It is that day that we anticipate with each celebration of this Holy Eucharist, where we are fed with the medicine for our doubts. We are given the fertile soil which will allow our mustard seeds to flourish into the largest of trees. Food which helps us to have simple faith in God, in God's will, simple faith in God's timing and action in an often confusing world. Faith in mustard seed people like Mary.